If something goes wrong at hospital in the States, it's pretty normal to slap them with a lawsuit, sue them for millions. In New Zealand, it's not so easy. This is a story of a Northland couple who tried to sue a hospital and really believed they'd win. And why not? After all, doctors supported them, the lawyers were confident, and the court case seemed to go well. What's more, as psychotherapists, they'd observed the judge and reckoned he was sympathetic. But as Anna Kenner reports, they got it totally wrong.
The Beaumont Connips, Michael and Sarah, live in self-imposed exile in Queensland. They quit New Zealand after a big court case backfired on them, and their reputations were left in tatters by the findings of a district court judge.
He had seemed to have gone to some lengths to pull us apart, to shred our characters, to attack our personalities.
The couple did what few Kiwis have done, sued a big hospital over the death of a loved one. But not only did they lose, the judge slammed them, portraying them as dishonest, obsessed and irrational.
We didn't deserve to be treated the way we were treated. Nobody deserves to be treated like that.
It all began 4 years ago with the loss of Sarah's mother, Barbara.
She was so full of life and fun. She loved children, absolutely adored her grandchildren.
She tested me in the beginning to make sure that I was the right one for Sarah, but no, we became incredibly good friends.
Barbara Green, 67, died in Auckland's North Shore Hospital after being admitted over Labour weekend in 1999 with what doctors thought was a virus. But as the weekend went on, her family started to get really worried.
She was slumping down in the bed. She wasn't, able to sort of lift her head up, and she was obviously getting sicker.
Nursing notes record a sharp drop in Barbara Green's blood pressure on Sunday afternoon. But this wasn't considered serious enough to call a doctor. Next day, Labour Monday, the family say she deteriorated further.
She was saying that she was feeling worse and worse, and so we started to ask if she could be reassessed by a doctor.
It was like the hospital was just an empty building. It seemed like that at that point. After 9 hours of waiting and with growing concern, we thought maybe we'll use the cell phone and phone a community doctor to get them to come into the hospital.
An on-call house surgeon did eventually examine Barbara Green on Monday night, but by Tuesday she was no better.
She actually ended up begging me, holding onto my arm, saying to me, Sarah, please get me somebody to help me.
Much of the family's version of events is disputed by North Shore Hospital. For example, nursing staff deny Barbara Green was distressed. In any event, the family decided to move her to a private hospital. They told a senior doctor.
I just said, look, I'm just going to move her. I have to get someone who can respond when we need response.
On the morning of Tuesday, October 26th, Barbara Green was transferred by ambulance to Southern Cross Hospital. Blood tests there revealed she was suffering acute kidney failure and needed intensive care, which Southern Cross couldn't provide. She was rushed back to North Shore, but it was too late.
And in the end, she was on life support, and we had to turn it off.
Barbara Green was cremated on her 68th birthday. Her family was shocked at her unexpected death, but also angry at her treatment. Their first stop in their quest for answers was the hospital, which didn't accept any fault. Next stop was the ACC, which cleared the hospital of blame. Then a complaint was laid with the Health and Disability Commissioner, Ron Patterson. After a 2-year investigation, he found that there was important clinical information that was missed by those caring for Barbara Green. And because the deterioration in her condition was not recognised, there was a delay in initiating appropriate treatment. Finally, it seemed, some acknowledgement. But in spite of his criticisms, Patterson concluded, "I am satisfied Mrs. Green's death cannot be attributed to the nursing and medical care she received at North Shore Hospital." So where to from here? Michael and Sarah began to look at legal action.
Well, I certainly felt that it needed to be investigated.
Auckland barrister Antonia Fisher, who decided to take the case after positive feedback from medical experts.
Most of the medical experts that we had spoken to felt that there had been mistakes made by the hospital, serious mistakes made by the hospital.
But that was just the start. Fisher said because of ACC laws, Michael and Sarah couldn't sue the hospital for straight negligence. They'd have to prove they'd suffered mental trauma, or in legal terms, nervous shock.
You've got to show there's been negligence. You've got to show that you have suffered a psychiatric injury, not just normal grief and loss, but a psychiatric injury, and the negligence has actually caused you to suffer a psychiatric injury.
Pineapple. Watermelon.
Two psychiatrists diagnosed that Michael and Sarah had both suffered psychiatric injury by witnessing what happened to Barbara Green in North Shore Hospital. As well as their experience in the ward, they'd slept on the floor of the intensive care unit during Barbara's final days and had to witness her body grotesquely swollen and discoloured because of kidney failure. Confident they had a strong case, these two psychotherapists sold their rural Northland property to fund the court case.
So I thought that they had reason to be concerned and reason to pursue their grievance.
Dr. Roger Reynolds, a consultant at Middlemore Hospital. 2 years earlier, he'd been asked to review the circumstances of Barbara Green's death for the coroner.
My conclusions in the coroner's report were that there were moments in the management of Mrs. Green when further clinical evaluation should have taken place, and that in turn might have given the opportunity for additional treatment.
Reynolds says that one of those moments was when her blood pressure dropped dramatically.
A drop in blood pressure of that magnitude may herald the onset of what's called shock. That is a situation in which the patient's circulation and internal organs are starting to fail.
Dr. Reynolds agreed to support the family in court. Then, just days before the hearing, the hospital offered a $75,000 settlement. With legal fees already way over that, and confident they had a strong case, the couple turned it down.
But I think it strengthened our resolve and our belief that we were right and that we needed to go ahead with that trial.
During the 2.5-week trial, the hospital vigorously defended its care of Barbara Green. Doctors and nurses said they did what they thought was right in the face of symptoms that didn't indicate how sick she really was. Evidence from a medical specialist said Barbara Green suffered a devastating illness and probably would have died anyway, no matter what the hospital had done. But in the closing days of the trial, a consultant who'd cared for Mrs. Green made some crucial admissions. The doctor, who'd examined Barbara Green at North Shore, said he'd made an error by not ordering blood tests, and that he regretted it absolutely.
And after cross-examination, the expert witness for the hospital agreed that there had been grounds for reassessment, that there were grounds for repeating the blood tests.
Listening to that, what was your reaction?
Our reaction was that we were right, that everything that we had said from the moment that we were sort of trying to get help had been supported.
I felt that the hospital's experts made a lot of retractions and agreed that there were serious concerns. So I felt that the trial had gone reasonably well.
We really felt that we had won.
But they couldn't have been more wrong.
Silence! All stand for His Honour the Queen's Judge.
Judge Roderick Joyce found resoundingly that the hospital had not been negligent in its care of Barbara Green, and that her family hadn't suffered anything close to nervous shock.
I had great difficulty understanding how the judge had arrived at his conclusions.
I knew Sarah and Michael would be bitterly disappointed.
Disappointed hardly covers it. Not only had Michael and Sarah lost the case, they suffered a stinging attack from the judge. He portrayed them as obsessed, dishonest, and unreliable.
I've been a damned good therapist for 25 years, and I thought I had a pretty good reading of that judge. And what he came out with was one of the most
Awful.
just stunning things I've ever experienced in my life.
Abusive, really, especially of me.
The judge described Sarah as theatrical and irrational, and said she had an ability to distort realities. Virtually no one involved escaped her frequently undisciplined tongue. She was a woman who sees herself pursuing a magnificent obsession.
If there's a magnificent obsession somewhere afoot here, I would suggest that the judge has got a magnificent obsession.
It's a pretty rude thing to say about a judge.
I think he said some pretty rude things about us.
As for Michael, the judge said his evidence was no more convincing than Sarah's, and that he had nothing altogether very useful to say, and implied he was a puppet of his wife.
I can well visualise how Mrs. Beaumont Connop particularly, echoed no doubt by her husband, would have been conducting herself so as to create a situation where even a doctor with the strongest sense of self-possession would be struggling.
He said the family's decision to move Barbara Green to another hospital was foolish, and their protests to medical staff tantamount to harassment, a demanding, unmannered approach. Michael and Sarah deny they were ever aggressive or threatening to hospital staff. He painted you as the relatives from hell.
Yeah.
I know. And the thing is, when we went to the private hospital, we've got a written note saying that we were a lovely family.
While he slammed the family, Judge Joyce appeared to take a sympathetic view to North Shore Hospital staff. He thought the doctor, who admitted an error in failing to order blood tests, was being too hard on himself.
He, and thus North Shore Hospital, cannot reasonably be held accountable for an oversight born of the unique and distinctly distracting circumstances created by this volatile family.
That it just seemed highly personal.
You've got to wonder where he's coming from to be so outrageous, to be so attacking, to single out victims in this case, and to heap upon them scorn and derision, and to make it so damning that it's virtually impossible to continue with the life that we had in New Zealand.
But there was worse to come. The judge ordered that Michael and Sarah pay the hospital's legal costs of more than $120,000.
We felt just harassed by that man.
In his ruling, Judge Joyce acknowledged it was unusual for a judge to make direct observations about litigants or witnesses. But in the case of the Beaumont Connops, he said, their characteristics and conduct turned out to be a pivotal factor in the determination of this case. They may look like part of the cafe set enjoying the delights of Queensland's Sunshine Coast, but Michael and Sarah feel more like refugees. Although Michael has 2 teenage sons in New Zealand, he says he and Sarah will never live there again. And he says the damning judgment has put paid to their professional careers.
He didn't have to, as a judge, say any of those things in his conclusion. He simply had to say, I don't have the same credibility for these people as I do for these people. And it would have been the end of the story. It's still a decision based in credibility. You've really got to wonder.
And we're not bad people.
We haven't done anything wrong. We haven't done anything wrong.
But Sarah does concede one error of judgment. On the first anniversary of her mother's death, she sent what the judge referred to as acidic cards to 2 doctors, blaming them. She regrets it.
I was just out of my mind with grief and loss, and I was angry.
Once a respected child and adolescent psychotherapist, Sarah now spends her days at home with her pets.
Sarah can't work. She's lost all hope of being able to do the work that she's done for so many years because she doesn't have hope within her anymore.
Sarah, who had no history of psychiatric illness before her mother's death, has gone further downhill since the judgment.
I feel that really abused and angry at myself and at everything that's happened. And I feel responsible because we lost our home and all the money that we've had to spend, and that's been really hard. And I really miss the boys. And it's just very difficult to have lost so much.
Some people might say, in spite of it all, the system has spoken, not once but 3 times, that the hospital wasn't at fault. Why can't you just move on now?
Because I know that what happened was wrong, and no one will ever change my mind about that.
2020 wanted to speak to a representative of North Shore Hospital about the care of Barbara Green, but Waitemata Health declined to comment. Instead, it sent us a statement in which it says it has confidence in the staff who cared for Mrs. Green and stands behind the judge's impressions of the clinicians as consistently conscientious, gentle and decent, precise, careful and disciplined. And the hospital says her death remains a mystery, and this is the reason why, despite the best efforts of staff, Mrs. Green sadly declined and passed away.
I accept that my mother could well have been going to die. What I can't accept is the fact that she wasn't treated when there was a chance that she could have survived. I'm disputing the level of care that she got while she was alive.
Medical experts share Sarah and Michael's concerns about that level of care. The fact remains, North Shore Hospital didn't pick up the seriousness of Barbara Green's illness, and her family believes their concerns were totally justified.
When we said something was wrong, it was wrong. When Barbara said something was wrong, it was wrong. It doesn't matter how many magic wands you wave over that information, and it doesn't matter how many judges conclude that we're obsessed and that our personalities are suspect. You can't take away the facts of the case.
At first, the Beaumont Connops vowed to appeal the judgment, but when their costs were reduced from $120,000 to $50,000, they decided to pull out and accept their fate. And when we come back, Private Jessica Lynch, the famous Diane Sawyer interview. That's next.